A 20-point jump on the LSAT is not a fantasy. It's real, it's possible, but it doesn't happen by accident. If you're starting in the low to mid 150s and dreaming of a 170 plus score, that is ambitious, and I love that, but you've got to approach it with strategy, not desperation. This is Brian, and he's looking to improve his LSAT score from a 154 to a 174 in the next 2.5 months. My name is Steve Schwartz, and I've been teaching the LSAT for the past 20 years, and I'll help him address them as he looks to improve by 20 points. So where are you scoring right now?
I've only ever taken one practice test, and that's my diagnostic. I took it about 2 weeks ago. I was at a 154.
And what are you hoping to achieve?
My goal is 174. That's the median of the schools I want to get into.
Okay, so you're looking for T14?
That's right.
How much time do you have before test day?
I'm currently signed up for August. I'm thinking of canceling that and getting in for September.
Okay, got it. So that would be moving us from having 6 weeks before the test to having 10 weeks before the test. And how many hours per week are you able to devote to your prep between now and the test?
I'm hoping for a minimum of 10 hours a week. I just need the structure to be able to have a schedule.
Okay, got it. And we've created for you a personalized study plan, right?
That's right. Yep. To be honest with you, I've been following it due to finishing training at my current job and just schedule conflicts, but I hope to get on it this upcoming week.
Let's get one thing out of the way. A 20-point jump on the LSAT is not a fantasy. It's not a myth, and it's not reserved for geniuses. It's real, it's possible, but, and this is a big but, it doesn't happen by accident. If you're starting in the low to mid 150s and dreaming of a 170 plus score, that's not crazy. That is ambitious, and I love that, but you've got to approach it with strategy, not desperation. Now here's the trap most people fall into. They see a gap that big and think, I just need to do more. More drilling, more full-length exams, more flashcards, more hours. They throw themselves into the LSAT like a brick wall they can break through by sprinting harder. But that's not how the test works. This is not about brute force. It's about building the right skills in the right order. So let's break this down. Because when we work with students aiming for that kind of leap, we use a very specific roadmap. The first step is to fix your accuracy first. If you're missing a bunch of questions even with unlimited time, you've got a logic problem, not a timing problem. And no amount of full-length exams will fix that. Start by slowing way down. Strip out the clock. Focus on solving 5 to 10 questions at a time perfectly. You want to get to the point where you're not just getting them right, you are explaining why every other answer is wrong. This is about building your foundation. Without that, everything else falls apart. Your second step is to train for speed, but strategically. Once your accuracy is strong, then, and only then, you introduce timing. But don't jump straight into full sections. That's like deciding to run a marathon after walking 10 minutes on the treadmill. Instead, use sprints. Try doing 3 logical reasoning questions in 3 minutes, or 10 reading comp questions in 12 minutes. This gets your brain used to thinking faster without letting your accuracy collapse. Then your third step is to build endurance, and this is where you bring in the full-length timed exams. But the key here is not just taking them, it's reviewing them like a scientist. When we work with students, we have them do something called the Socratic review method. It's not just what did I get wrong, it's why did I fall for that trap? What was tempting about that answer? What pattern did I miss? That's how you stop repeating the same mistakes, and that's how you build a gut instinct for trap answers. Then step 4 is to trust the process. This one's the hardest because your score won't rise in a straight line. You'll plateau, you'll dip, you'll feel like nothing's working, and that's normal. Big score jumps come from small breakthroughs that compound over time. It might be the moment where you finally understand necessary versus sufficient, or the day you stop falling for correlation causation traps, or when you realize you can finish a reading comp passage without rereading every paragraph twice. These shifts add up, quietly, behind the scenes, and then one day, boom, your next full-length test is 10 points higher. So yes, you can go from a 154 to a 174, but not by studying harder, not by burning yourself out. You get there by studying smarter, by fixing accuracy first, and training speed second, and treating review like it's the real test. And if you've already put in the hours and you still feel stuck, that doesn't mean you're broken. It probably just means you're missing the right framework, which is what we focus on with our students, giving them the structure that lets them turn effort into results. You don't need magic, you just need a map.
When it comes to the schedule, would it be okay to start from where you have it now? Like, for example, would I have to go back and complete the old content before going on to what's scheduled for today?
Got it. So the question here is that because you've fallen behind in the study plan due to other obligations like work, you are wondering if you should just skip over what you haven't done and jump into today's assignments. Yeah, that's a fair question. It always becomes a challenge because we do have test day coming up and we have to get ready for that target date unless, of course, we move the target date, in which case we can then redo the plan for you. If you do decide to push back your exam by 4 weeks, we can redo your plan for you entirely. But directly to your question, we can't skip over things just because we miss them, because what we skip might be important, right? Just as every part of the plan is important in some way. It's not like you could skip the lessons on necessary assumption and just never learn necessary assumption because you were busy that week. Not all parts of the plan are equally important though. And so if there are some lower priority areas that you never get to because of time constraints, that might be a difficult choice that we ultimately need to make just because of the constraints of the real world and the fact that your test is coming up. And so we can help you rank order or prioritize or triage what is most important and then skip over what is least important if we just don't have the time for it. You ever start a workout program, miss a few days, and then think to yourself, maybe I'll just skip to the part where I should be by now? Yeah, that logic does not work for the LSAT either. Falling behind on your study plan isn't the problem. The problem is what happens next when you try to catch up by skipping key lessons, hoping it won't matter. Spoiler, it matters. Let me tell you how this usually plays out. You fall behind. Life happens. Maybe work gets busy. Maybe you had a rough week. Whatever the reason, you miss a few days. And that's okay. It happens. Now you've got this beautiful LSAT calendar you were so proud of, and it is wrecked. And instead of adjusting, you start skipping things. You think, I'll just jump to the next section. I'll figure out must-be-true questions later. But the thing is, the LSAT is not modular. You can't just hopscotch your way through the curriculum and expect to absorb it. Each lesson builds on the last. If you skip necessary versus sufficient, guess what? You're gonna get wrecked on strengthen, weaken, flaw, parallel, basically half the test. It's like trying to build IKEA furniture without the middle pages of the manual. Sure, eventually you'll get a table, but one leg's gonna be upside down and it'll collapse as soon as you breathe near it. So here's what to do instead. First, you wanna pause, reset, and recalibrate. Forget the guilt, you are not behind. You're a human being, not a robot. Open your study plan and draw a line where you actually are. That is your new day one. Then prioritize the non-negotiables. Ask yourself, what are the core skills I need to be ready for the test? If you're a month out, maybe you don't need to rewatch every theory video, but you do need to master the question types that appear most often. When we work with students who've fallen off track, and let's be real, that's almost everybody at some point, we help them build a new custom study plan, mapping it out day by day. Now, you don't want to skip things just to feel caught up. That is emotional logic and it'll cost you points. Let's say you skipped logical reasoning flaw questions to stay on schedule. Now you're in a timed section and 1 out of every 4 questions is a flaw question. That's like showing up to a math test and saying, I didn't study fractions, but I think I'll be fine. Nope. So here's the rule. It's better to fully learn 70% of the material than half learn 100%. Slow down, learn deeply, and go narrow before you go wide. Because the LSAT doesn't care how much you've covered. It only cares how well you can think under pressure. And if you missed a few days or a few weeks, don't stress. What matters isn't how pretty your study plan looks. It's whether you're actually improving. So with our students, we don't tell them, just catch up. We say, let's be ruthless about what matters most. And you can do the same. Now, what would you say are your biggest weak areas right now?
For me, the biggest areas that I was struggling with, especially with that practice test that I took, was timing and fatigue. I think given enough time, I can get most of my questions right. I feel like I spend too long on RC passages. I'll read it once, not really get the point, try to answer questions, and then have to reread it again.
Got it. Okay, so you're reading it, but because you're not absorbing all the information, you're then getting questions wrong.
Right.
Now, what does your actual approach to reading comp look like right now?
I don't have a specific strategy. I know that the questions follow a similar format, just author's point, looking at a specific sentence in the passage, that sort of thing. So I just read it over once and then go through the questions, hoping to find an answer that I predicted.
Okay, but what about your initial read?
I've been using the Law Hub Advantage platform to do it, so I use the highlighter that they provide. I highlight the aspects that I think are the most important, things that author's perspective, main points, that sort of thing.
Okay, and how's that working for you?
The tool, it helps me outline exactly what I think is important. I think I'm overusing it though.
So maybe highlighting a bit too much?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what percentage of the passage would you say you're highlighting?
I would probably say like 70%.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, it's almost like what you haven't highlighted is going to draw more attention.
Right.
I mean, you have time to experiment if you have 10 weeks before your test now. Maybe you do some passages or sections of reading comp where you try highlighting nothing. Maybe you do some where you only highlight, say, 2 or 3 sentences max, and then see how that goes. See what feels better. See what helps you get more questions right. Because the thing is, there's a time cost to clicking around and fiddling with the highlighting tool. And I don't know if this has been your experience, but it's been mine and that of some other students where it's a little bit glitchy and imprecise.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had that experience?
Yeah. If you highlight like a part of a word, it does the whole word and it's like really finicky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's something where it's going to have a real time cost on test day, because test day, the software is going to be the same. And you don't want to waste time being frustrated over a finicky tool. In contrast, the notes you take by hand on your scratch paper are not subject to the same flaws or glitches. So you might try transitioning to taking only a few notes, writing down only a few words, and see if that might be an alternative way to crystallize your understanding of the main idea, for example. Yes, you have time, play around, experiment, and see, can you focus any of your pre-work, whether highlighting or note-taking, on just crystallizing what is the central core idea, what is the author's opinion. If they could leave you with only one thought or one thesis statement, what would that be? And that's going to help you knock out any of those general global questions.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I'll make sure to implement that.
Let's talk about reading comp. Specifically, let's talk about what most people are doing wrong without even realizing it. Over highlighting. You know what I'm talking about. You open a passage, you start reading, and suddenly your highlighter turns into a paint roller. Yellow, blue, pink. You're not analyzing anymore, you're decorating. And by the time you finish, you've basically color-coded the entire thing and still don't know what the author's point was. Here's the thing. Highlighting is not the same as understanding. Just because a sentence is yellow doesn't mean your brain retained it. In fact, most people highlight just because they're anxious. They don't know what's important, so they highlight everything, hoping they'll figure it out later. But I'll figure it out later is not a strategy. That's quicksand. So here's how to fix it. Ditch the highlighter for a while. Seriously, go cold turkey. Force yourself to read a passage with 0 highlighting. It'll feel uncomfortable, and that's good. Discomfort means you're finally thinking. Then ask better questions while you read. Every time you finish a paragraph, pause and ask, what was that paragraph about? How does it connect to the previous one? And what does the author think about it? That's it. 3 questions. You don't need a flowchart, just stay engaged. Then create simple mental tags. Instead of coloring up the passage, start mentally labeling paragraphs. For example, you might say, okay, paragraph 1's the problem, paragraph 2 gives the background, and paragraph 3 is a new solution. That's the kind of clarity that helps you answer questions fast without rereading the whole passage in a panic. When we work with students who struggle with reading comp, and a lot of high scorers do by the way, the first thing we check is how they're interacting with the passage. Because 90% of the time, they're doing too much, not too little. They're scribbling, underlining, highlighting, annotating, and by the end, they've got a rainbow-colored passage and 0 comprehension. So here's the new rule. Highlight with purpose, not out of panic. Only mark something if you know why it matters, like the author's viewpoint or a major turning point. Otherwise, skip it. Your future self will thank you. Hey, real quick guys, if you're just getting started with your LSAT prep or you're looking for a quick refresher, you can grab your free easy LSAT cheat sheet linked below this video. It's jam-packed full of concrete actionable tactics you can take and apply to your LSAT prep for a quick score boost, and it's 100% free, so you can grab your copy below. And now, back to the show. Aside from reading comp, what about logical reasoning? Any particular struggles there?
LR, I feel like I understand a lot of the questions just from taking like intro to logic in undergrad. I understand premises, how can arguments work. So I'm able to figure out after some time each question. Some of the ones that have words that I've never seen before or layers of logic that I don't quite follow, those take me a lot longer. When I did a drill set, I noticed that the ones I got wrong were those higher level, like level 4s, and not so much the level 2s or level 3s.
When you mention unfamiliar vocabulary, are these just random difficult words, or are they showing up consistently?
Just random ones that appear in the passage, things that I can't follow quite well in my head, different argument mappings. I can't remember the exact question.
Okay, I'm just wondering if this is like abstract argument-related terminology, like affirming the consequent, antecedent, precedent, things like that.
Yeah, those words sound familiar.
Okay, yeah, so those are words that are worth learning and phrases that are worth learning because they do show up repeatedly on the LSAT. I'm not going to say to go out and get some list of difficult English vocabulary because the English language is vast and there's, literally thousands of words that might show up once every 20 exams. Those are not what you need to spend time on. But rather instead, if there are particular abstract formal logic terms, those do show up repeatedly on the LSAT. And there are going to be certain questions maybe later in the section, like say question number 22, where all 5 choices contain those kinds of abstract phrases. Those are worth learning. And so even for the wrong answers, you could then look up what each of those choices means and get examples of what that might have looked like in practice to give yourself illustrative examples so that you can better understand those if those ever happen to show up again.
Yeah.
So those are certainly worth learning. And those are going to be, as you said, in level 4, level 5. Yeah, so the key to those is just practice, look them up, and then again, generate examples with even the same topic as the stimulus was to see what that might have looked like, to make it real for yourself. And you're going to see those in maybe method of reasoning questions or role of statement questions most often. Let's talk about something that freaks out a lot of smart people on the LSAT, weird terminology. You open a logical reasoning question, and it says something like, which one of the following, if true, most seriously undermines the author's conflation of sufficient and necessary conditions? And you're like, wait, what? Am I supposed to know what that means? Was there a class I missed called LSAT Latin? No, you're not missing anything. The LSAT just loves to sound fancy. But here's the truth. You don't need to memorize every obscure logic term. You just need to understand what the test is actually asking. Let's break it down. Necessary versus sufficient sounds intimidating, but once you get it, it's just necessary means you need it, but it doesn't guarantee anything, and sufficient means if you have it, you're good, it's enough. For example, if I say, if it's raining, then the ground is wet, rain is sufficient to get the ground wet, but it's not necessary because someone could have used a hose. Once you understand that, those scary terms are just labels. The thinking behind them is what matters. Now here's what most students do wrong. They either panic and skip the question, or they try to memorize every technical term from some list they found online. Both are a waste of time. Here's what to do instead. First, make a list of every phrase that's confused you. Not all logic terms, just the ones you've actually seen and thought, wait, what? Then look up a plain English definition. Then write your own version. So don't copy what a tutor or a book says, write what makes sense to you. Then build a little cheat sheet. Not with 100 terms on it, just maybe 10 to 15. That is all you need to decode about 95% of what the LSAT throws at you. When we work with students aiming for a 170 or above, we don't say, go learn every formal logic term ever invented. We say, let's make sure that when the test says something fancy, you actually know what it means. Because here's the dirty secret of the LSAT. The questions aren't that complicated. The language just makes it look that way. And once you take away the intimidation, you realize, oh, they're just testing the same 5 to 6 logic ideas over and over with different phrasing. So if you're reading a question and thinking, I have no idea what this is saying, that's not a sign you're bad at logic, it's a sign you haven't learned to translate yet. And the good news is, that's a skill, and you can build it, one weird phrase at a time. What else? Other particular struggles in logical reasoning?
In LR, I don't really have a strategy going into it. I really just read, highlight what I think is important, and then go to the question. I don't remember. What is your recommendation when it comes to LR? Read the question first.
I personally like to read the question first because it gives me the framing going in of what to look for. So for example, a strengthen question, we know that we're going to be looking at an argument. The argument contains a gap of some kind. In contrast, for a must-be true question, we might be looking at a fact set. But even if we weren't, and it was an argument, we wouldn't be coming at it from the perspective of looking to poke holes. We're just looking for what else must be true on the basis of the information in the stimulus. For a flaw question, we know there's a gap and we're looking to poke holes in it, or at least to articulate what is wrong with it. Now, there are top scorers who like reading the stimulus first, and that's fine. So I'm not dogmatic about it. Again, you have 10 weeks, so just like you can experiment with reading comp, you can experiment with logical reasoning approach and see what feels more natural to you. But I'd be thinking also about pacing. The nice thing about logical reasoning is that you have a general order of difficulty. The questions get tougher as the section goes on. And so you mentioned having trouble more with level 4, level 5 questions, right? It would make sense to spend more time on the harder questions because they require more time. So I would recommend that you speed through the easier questions, build up a time bank that you can then apply to the tougher ones later in the section. And this is especially important when you're looking for, say, a 175. You want to go to T14, you've got to complete the entire section, ideally with time to spare. So my benchmark is first 10 questions, knock them out in 10 minutes because they are easier. Don't second guess yourself on those. Trust your gut. And then you'll have more time than average for the tougher ones that truly need it. Here's a simple tweak that could save you dozens of points on the LSAT. Start by reading the question stem first. And yeah, I know, it sounds tiny, almost too obvious, but I can't tell you how many students make logical reasoning way harder than it needs to be just because they start in the wrong place. Let me explain. Most people read the stimulus first. They dive into the paragraph. Some researchers believe yada yada, economic trends, caffeine intake, and they're halfway through it before they realize, wait, what am I even supposed to do with this? And now they're stuck. They reread the whole thing, twice, maybe 3 times. They're confused, frustrated, and already down 2 minutes before they even look at the choices. This is like watching an entire movie and only knowing what genre it is after the credits roll. So here's the fix. Read the question stem first. That one line, the actual question, tells you exactly what the test wants. Let's go through a few quick examples. If it says strengthen, you're not trying to prove anything. You're looking for a boost, even a small one, to the argument. If it says flaw, you're hunting for bad logic. What assumption did they make? Where's the leap? And if it says must be true, you're not dealing with arguments at all. It's pure logic, what has to follow based on what they gave you. See the difference? When you know what kind of task you're doing, you can read the argument with a specific purpose. You're not just reading, you are analyzing. You're filtering out irrelevant stuff. You're catching the key transition words. You're mentally tagging ideas as you go. And all of a sudden, logical reasoning doesn't feel like a maze anymore. It feels like a checklist. Now, quick side note, with our students, we always encourage experimentation. Some people end up loving question first. Others like to read the stimulus first. And both can work fine. But the important thing is, you should try it both ways. Don't just stick with what you're used to. So if logical reasoning feels hard, if you feel like you're reading a foreign language every time, try flipping the order. Start with the question, then read the argument with your mission already clear. It takes 30 seconds to try, and it could save you 10 points over the next few weeks. That's what I call a big ROI. Hey, real quick guys, a lot of you have been asking me how you can be featured in one of these LSAT study breakdowns and get feedback on your approach. The only way is to join one of my LSAT coaching programs. You can check out the links below to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. And now back to the show.
In terms of timing, when do you recommend taking time sections, or should I, for the time being, stick on time?
Yeah, good question. So assuming that the 10 weeks that we have from now till your test, we could divide it into roughly 3, 3, 4. So 3 weeks on accuracy and drilling, the next 3 weeks on pacing with individual sections, and the final 4 weeks on endurance doing full-length timed exams. Now, I'm not saying wait until week 6 or 7 to do full exams, though. I would say you do want to sprinkle some time to work in earlier, but the overall focus of each phase should be, again, drilling, then sections, then exams.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think my biggest thing right now is actually sitting down and getting it done. What kind of accountability tools do you offer here at LSAT Unplugged?
Well, the big one is that day-by-day study plan. And so, like I said, we will redo it for you based on your new time frame, targeting the exam in 10 weeks rather than 6. And then also I'd be looking at where can you carve out time in your day to make sure that you're actually able to put in at least say 2 hours a day, right? So is that going to be waking up early and knocking out some time before work? Is it going to be during lunch? Is it going to be after work? Is it going to be on the weekends? And even just you're using a planner or a Google Calendar, for example, and blocking off the time to make sure that it actually happens and you're able to make it a priority where nothing else gets in the way. Then you also have your access to those semi-private sessions 4 nights a week. So then if you can block off time earlier in the day or after work to just block off an hour to watch the videos, that would be a way to take advantage.
One thing that I noticed that you did ask that I am not doing right now is journaling my questions. What program do you normally recommend using for that? Just Excel?
Yeah, so Excel is great. A lot of students like Google Sheets. You could also use Google Docs or even a physical notebook. I like Sheets and Docs though, just because you can more easily have templates. Say for example, in a spreadsheet, you have different columns for different elements of the question. So you can have a column for the stimulus, the question stem, the wrong answer, the right answer. Then for every question that you're reviewing, you lay out your analysis or your thoughts associated with that element of the question. And then you could also have a column for key takeaways. The idea here being that because it's templated, you're going to be consistent in mapping out your thoughts associated with each element of the question. You can drill down on what gave you trouble, what gave you pause, where you spent too much time, where you could have been more efficient. But for every question that you get wrong and every question that you have difficulty with, you want to outline what happened there so you can truly learn the lesson from that question and avoid making the same mistake again. Okay, so I would start doing that and devote maybe at least 20% of your study time on that alone, because you want to highlight the key takeaways from your review process to make sure you've truly learned the lesson. Because every question that you get wrong is an opportunity to learn something new. But if you don't learn the lesson from it, you'll just repeat it because the exam, of course, repeats itself. If you're hitting reading comp and thinking, why am I suddenly exhausted? You're not broken, you're just reading the passage the wrong way. Here's what's probably happening. You start reading. You want to be thorough, so you read slow. You try to remember everything. Maybe you highlight every other sentence. You're not along like, okay, I think I got this. Then you hit the questions and suddenly none of it stuck. You panic. You go back to reread. But now you're frustrated and behind on time. By the time you finish the last question, your brain is soup and you've still got 2 more passages to go. Sound familiar? This is what I call silent burnout. It's not that you're overstudying, it's that you're mentally exhausted while you're studying. So let's fix that. The key shift here is this. You're not reading to remember, you're reading to navigate. And that changes everything. Let me say it again because it's important. Reading comp is not a memory test. It is a navigation test. You're not supposed to hold every fact in your head. You just need a map, a rough outline of the passage, where the main idea is, where the author's opinion comes in, and where the contrasting viewpoints show up. That's it. So here's how to read smarter without burning out. First step is to set a purpose before you read. Literally say to yourself, I'm reading to find the main idea, the author's attitude, and the structure. That is your mental GPS. Everything else is optional. Then your next step is to tag each paragraph mentally. After you read each paragraph, pause for 2 seconds and ask, what did I just read and why does that matter? For example, maybe paragraph 1 introduces an old theory, paragraph 2 criticizes it, and paragraph 3 offers a new approach. Boom, that is a map. You can go back to any part quickly when the question's asked. Then you want to stop rereading unless you know exactly what you're looking for. Rereading everything is a panic move. Only go back when a question sends you to a specific detail and you already know where it lives. When we work with students who struggle with reading comp fatigue, and honestly, that's a huge chunk of people in the 150 to 165 range, this is where we start. Because it's not about reading faster, it's about reading more efficiently. And once you stop trying to memorize the whole passage and start reading with a clear goal, you don't just save time, you protect your energy. You walk into passage number 3, still feeling sharp. And that's where the score jumps happen.
Besides the things that we spoke about today, how do you think I can position myself to put my best foot forward in terms of the LSAT?
Yeah, so I think it's looking at the highest yield areas, the areas giving you the most trouble. And so reading comp is an entire third of the test. And so when you said earlier, I don't feel like I have a good approach for a reading comp, that's a major red flag, of course. But we can fix that. We have 10 weeks. So getting clear on what are going to be the most important changes to make in your approach for reading comp is going to be a huge win. And so if that means we stop highlighting 70% of the passage and instead highlight nothing at all, or highlight only a little bit, that might save you valuable time that you can then devote to the questions. If you can start reviewing your mistakes, you can then avoid making those same mistakes again. And the very act of engaging in the review process itself may lead you to look more critically at your wrong answers and then determine what are the major weak points. There are usually particular question types or particular methods of reasoning in the stimulus or particular patterns in the trap answers that you're falling for. But if we're not collecting the data, we don't know where to focus. But once you start logging it in a mistake journal, in a sheet, for example, in an Excel spreadsheet, you may find that even after reviewing only 10, 20 questions, a pattern may start to emerge. If you find that a plurality of them are of one particular question type or a particular method of reasoning, that's a big glaring neon sign flashing in your face saying, spend more time here. And then that would lead you to go back to basics or fundamentals on that particular area. You then review that, you get better and more clear on it, then you see a boost from that alone. Let's be honest, you already know you're supposed to review your LSAT practice questions, but most people's review process looks like this. You check the answer key, shrug when you get it wrong, maybe read the explanation, then move on and hope for the best. If that's you, I'm not judging. I certainly did it too back in the day, but let's be real. That's not review. That's just answer checking. It's like bombing a workout and saying, well, I showed up to the gym. Yeah, you were there, but you didn't get better. The whole point of review is to turn mistakes into growth. Not to punish yourself, not to dwell, but to actually figure out what went wrong and why. So here's the mindset shift. The value of a practice test is not in the score, it's in the mistakes you don't repeat next time around. So here's how to review like a pro. First, you want to log every single miss with brutal honesty. That means keeping a spreadsheet, a notebook, whatever works for you. Each wrong answer gets logged with the question type, the right answer, the wrong answer you picked, why you picked it, and why it was wrong. Simple, yes. Easy? No. But that's where the magic happens. Then you want to spot your patterns and analyze your mistakes. After 10, 15 mistakes, you're going to start seeing repeat offenders. Maybe you keep misreading must be true questions. Maybe you fall for trap answers that feel close enough. Maybe you rush logical reasoning questions with percentages in them. And that's a classic one, by the way. And when we work with students, these review logs are a gold mine. We don't just say get better, we say here is the exact type of question where you're bleeding points. Let's plug that leak. Then you want to resolve the same question without time pressure. No clock, no guessing. Just take 5-10 minutes and walk through the logic from scratch. What's the argument? What assumption is it making? And why is the correct answer provably better than the others? You're not just aiming to get it right, you're training your brain to see how the LSAT thinks. And here's a bonus step for you. Keep a journal of your aha moments. It sounds cheesy, but it's not. If you realize something like, I always fall for vague answer choices in strengthening questions, write it down. You just bought yourself 2 to 4 points on the next test. And look, I get it. Reviewing like this takes time. It's not sexy. It doesn't give you that same dopamine hit of seeing your score go up instantly. But if you want real growth, if you want to stop making the same mistakes over and over, this is the way. And when students in our program make huge jumps, I'm talking 10, 20, even 30 points, this is one of the reasons why. They stopped doing more and they started learning more from what they already did. That's how you build score momentum, one reviewed mistake at a time.
When it comes to the rest of my law school application, I know it's a little different than undergrad. It looks like applications aren't even open at this point. I can't see prompts. What is the timeline that you usually see that law students take when it comes to submitting for T14s?
Yeah, so applications typically open September 1st or September 15th for any law school. And so on those dates, and they publish in advance when they're going to open them, you'll be able to see this cycle's application essay prompts. You should be able to see last year's, though, just with some creative Googling. And they don't typically change that much from year to year. And so you could even look at last year's and start working on your rough drafts based on last year's prompts. And then, of course, it really just requires changing the hook a little bit to adjust it for whatever the new prompt might be if it's changed. But ultimately, you're sharing a personal story. You're in some way communicating your reasons for wanting to go to law school somewhere in your application. And if you're taking the LSAT in September, you will still have 2 to 3 weeks before scores come back. And during that gap between taking it and getting your score, you can then shift your focus to working primarily on the essays. But getting that 175 is the biggest and best thing you could do in the short term. What would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
Well, I really appreciate you sharing the importance of going over each and every aspect of the LSAT, not skipping over things even if I miss it. I think that's really important. And also the idea of just taking it week by week. If I'm able to extend to 10 weeks, which I should be able to, I'll be able to focus those first 3 months on really understanding the LSAT questions, and then splitting up the next 3 and then 4, focusing on timing and just fatigue management. All of that insight has been really great.
Awesome. Great, Brian. Well, it was a pleasure. Keep at it. If you need anything, just reach out and let me know.
Sounds good, Steve. Thank you so much.